And we're going to be speaking with Tom Cirignano, the author of The Constant Outsider. And folks, read the book now, because when they start filming the movie, you're going to say, I read the book before. So we'll speak with Tom Cirignano as Cranberry Country Journal continues right after this from the former Lakeville Public Library and Somethin's Brewin Book Cafe. It's the 1-year anniversary. We're going to bring it back to Bob Folsick in the studios. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Cranberry Country Journal, a very special edition. We are live from the Somethin's Brewin Book Cafe at the corner of 105 and Route 18 in Lakeville, the old Lakeville Public Library. They're celebrating their 1-year anniversary. Come by and say hi to Lorraine and Kristen, the proprietors. Have a great cup of coffee. My wife's here. She's running in and getting me something, and whatever comes out of there, I know it's going to be good. So come by and say hello to the folks at Cranberry Country Journal and the folks here at the Somethin's Brewin Book Cafe. Right now, folks, I'm truly excited to have you join us as a local author of a book that I am giving the Cranberry Country Journal excellent read recommendation. The book is entitled The Constant Outsider, The Memoirs of a South Boston Mechanic, and its author is Lakeville resident Tom Cirignano. Tom, welcome to Cranberry Country Journal.
Oh, thanks, Paul, for having me on the show.
I'm thrilled that you're here. Let me say, first of all, to our listeners that Tom's book has made me tired. And it's because I made the mistake of reading it and starting it about 10 o'clock one night, Tom, lying in bed, and not to use the trite expression, but I literally couldn't put the book down. It was dawn before I know it. I got to the last page. So, folks, I recommend you purchase a copy. So, again, you can say you read it before the movie was finished. Tom, you're going to have to think about who's going to play you in the movie. So I was thinking of De Niro or
somebody better looking than me.
No. If I can briefly try to describe the book, folks, The Constant Outsider brings you inside the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it brings you to Dorchester, South Boston, and even to Braintree, sometimes that will be forever etched in Boston history. We have Tom as an auto mechanic and later the owner of his family's Emerson gas station on East 3rd Street, right smack in the middle of South Boston. And Tom provides you with a first-hand, lived it, been through it account of growing up in Boston, and it was a time... It was an interesting time, Tom, forced busing and drugs. And tell us about that time, first of all, that period.
There were so many things going on at once. It was just amazing. And when you're living through that time, you don't think of it as amazing. But, as time goes on, you say, wow, I firsthand observed the forced busing turmoil that was going on and lived right across the street from South Boston High School. You couldn't get a better view of the problems than being there. And then, of course, the gas shortage of the 70s. I mean, people don't realize what it was like for a gas station owner to have to try to survive through that era.
And I want to get you to tell an interesting story, folks, so stick around and talk about the gas price.
And then, of course, there was the crime that was running rampant at that time. At the same time, there was all these influences that, when you combine them, I mean, you couldn't help but have a really interesting life if you had to survive in that environment.
And you were the constant outsider, but I think just getting to know Tom just briefly, he has a nice way about him, and I think it turns you into that insider. You became part of that group in South Boston. So let's go back. Before we talk about the early years in Dorchester, I got to ask you, what took you so long to write this book?
Well, I never really thought of myself as a writer, for sure. And you know how you talk to family and friends around the campfire or whatever, and sometimes they would tell old stories, and I would tell some of the things that happened to me, and they always seemed so amazed, So I started to think they would actually tell me, write a book. So I would start to take notes, and when things would come to me in the middle of the night that I thought, oh, maybe I should include this in my notes, and I would just reach over on my nightstand and take a pen and pencil just a short note so I knew the topic to write about tomorrow. And I highly advise other people to do the same thing, because I think everybody's life is unique.
Yeah. Well, folks, what makes the book particularly unique is that after you read a chapter or so within the book, Tom has some spots for recollection. Tell me about that aspect of the book, which I found interesting.
Yeah, I find people very interesting, and what people don't realize is their life could be very interesting to anybody else, because it's different than what I grew up in. I mean, to me, when I hear about people that grew up without any kind of fighting in their neighborhood or things like that, it amazes me. I would like to read a book about just about all the people I know, because I think there's so much to be learned from that. I mean, sometimes people are irritated. If you read a book about them, you're going to realize, well, now I understand why he's the way he is. And I only wish I had the opportunity to read the book my dad might have written, or my grandfather. Oh, my God, that would have been so interesting.
Let's stop there for a second. I know your dad, very much a prominent character in the beginning of the film. He was a big influence in your life?
Oh, absolutely. And Italian fathers, they want their son to be a certain way, and I was always just about the opposite of what he wanted. I was a mild-mannered. I wasn't out in the street fighting, and you know, he grew up as a boxer. He used a phony name to become a professional boxer in South Boston to win gold watches so he could help feed his 10 siblings when he was a kid. And, you know, I tried to avoid conflict, but then you learn that's not going to work if you're going to survive. You know, you have to learn how to fight for yourself.
You tell some great stories of growing up in Dorchester in South Boston, talking about surviving. One of the stories, folks, Tom talks about working at a pharmacy, and some of the local youth came in and made themselves available, made the product available.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us that story. So
oh, my God. Well, I recognized one of these boys that came in through the door of the drugstore that I had been invited to work at when I was only in the 7th or 8th grade. I mean, I was very flattered that this gentleman offered me a job. And, of course, I was the person getting ready to close up at 9 o'clock. A group of local, I have to call them thugs, came in the door, and I don't know if they had been drinking or whatever, but they were just making a lot of noise, and they started grabbing things off the shelves, and one of them came around the corner behind the counter. I'm only a kid. They were 2 or 3 years older than me, and I'm sure he was going to go for the cash register next.
Yeah.
And I recognized one of the boys as being somebody that, in the book, I explained the violent history that he had, so I didn't associate with him, but I knew who he was and where he lived. So I yelled his name. That brought them all to their senses. They walked out of the store carrying everything that they had, short of going for the cash register, which I'm glad they didn't, because they knew I had recognized somebody. Anyway, I was told by the pharmacist out back that I was going to lose my job if the owner came back and found out that somebody I knew walked out of the store with handfuls of stuff. So I, like an, idiot, I went and I pursued them to where I knew their hangout was, which is a scary place.
What were you thinking on the way over there, though? These are some tough kids.
Thinking was not one of my strong points when I was in a situation like that. I always acted on instinct. And later I would say, wow, that was a really dangerous thing to do. But I did those things, and...
well, continue with the story. So you went to their hangout.
I went to the hangout, which happened to be a footbridge over the railroad tracks on Norfolk Street in Dorchester. And there was a platform that they had built underneath there that they used to hang out at. And I tell about how gruesome it was to get to that place. But they were down on the tracks because there were too many of them in the pitch darkness. And I approached them in the dark. They were all drinking beer, and they're, reveling in their snacks that they had stolen and everything. And I interrupted them, not knowing what they were going to do, and just said, hey, guys, I need to bring this stuff back to the store because the pharmacist knows I know who you are, and we know where you hang out, and if you don't return the stuff, the cops are going to be down here at your hangout. And to my total amazement, they agreed to let me, they said, whatever you can carry, you can take back with you.
I found that so amazing. Were you startled at the time?
Yeah. I've got these potato chip racks under my arms and everything, and I'm walking through in the darkness, coming back to the drugstore. And, of course, when the pharmacist came in, he said I shouldn't have done that. But the scary part about it was that exact same spot where I had confronted those guys in the dark. There was a dead body found there, I don't know, weeks or months later. I can't exactly. Time is a hard thing to keep track of.
Yep.
A person had been stabbed at that exact spot, laid across the railroad tracks, and the train had come by and just mutilated the body, of course, but they still were able to tell that it had been murdered first. And those guys that I had confronted were actually arrested on murder charges. And I don't know how many of them actually went to Vietnam in lieu of prosecution, but that was a popular thing back in those days.
Yep.
That they would say, hey, look, you can do 20 years in prison, or you want to join up and go fight in Vietnam. And I know the main character that I was familiar with, he did take that deal. So, but there's a lot of details about that story in the book, and
And the book is The Constant Outsider, Memoirs of a South Boston Mechanic. The author is Thomas Cirignano. And tell us first of all how folks can get the book. Some folks are listening and wondering, how do I get a copy?
Well, at the publisher's website, it's exlibris.com. They have a bookstore there. And, of course, I was amazed to find the book in all the European bookstores as far as Scotland, England, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, just about anywhere you look. And I'll tell you, the Internet is a wonderful thing. I can be a little guy from Lakeville writing my personal story, and now it's all over the world, and that's amazing to me.
Well, we're going to hear more of that story as we come back with Cranberry Country Journal.